Welcome to the Ecommerce Alley podcast, where we believe that great brands are built on passionate leadership, smart operations, and of course, powerful marketing. I'm Josh Coffey, your host, but today I have an incredible guest, and this guest is somebody that I have the fortune of collaborating with on an incredible e-commerce brand. Now, Dave is one of those hidden gems that when you meet them, you're like, I can't take notes fast enough. And he is a master at Facebook ads. So, Dave, man, I'm excited to have you here. Because we've been talking about this for a couple weeks now since we joined forces with a client of ours, and Dave is one of the paid media buyers. Now, what I will say is the methodology he has is unlike anything that I have seen, and he told me about it 6 weeks ago, actually, about it. We implemented it, and we've seen some pretty crazy results, and I'll share later, Dave, and I actually have some stats I want to share with you later.
Nice.
But all of that said, man, thanks for joining me here. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate being able to share some of what I've learned, and my cat's going to say hi as well. But yeah, looking forward to chatting with you. Excited.
Awesome. Well, what I do want to do, just to kind of give everyone a little bit of a background on you. So Dave started as an information security consultant. He was working with companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG Consulting, and is it Northrop Grumman?
Not Northrop Grumman. They're like one of the 3 or 4 or 5 major government contractors that are out there.
Really?
Like,
oh, wow.
$5 billion company.
Wow.
Hardcore.
That's
awesome. I was suit and tie, security clearance. I was hardcore back then.
No, that's funny because that doesn't seem like you. Not your vibe anymore?
Not as much anymore.
Yeah.
No, but it was for the first half of my adult life. And it was good. It taught me a lot of stuff about just organization and kind of professionalism, stuff that when I entered this online world was a little shocked that it wasn't quite as present as I was used to kind of in the very professional world.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've made some pretty big shifts, and what I will just kind of say is, so you have, just from what I've gathered, so you've taken that, you've then moved into doing tons of product launches. You own a boutique traffic or Facebook traffic agency. You guys spend millions and millions of dollars a year working with clients, and you have very unique methodology, which we're definitely diving into today. I just want to know, how do you go from working for the government to massive paid media buying for very large multi-7 and 8-figure brands?
Through a bunch of crazy circumstances and synchronicities. I connected with a friend at the time, and I started doing some online product launch stuff with him. And then he ended up getting an agreement to do the original StomperNet. I don't know if you ever heard of that. It was very big at one point. It was what they report is something like, it was either 17 or $20 million in a 24-hour period. The reality was their product was $1,000 a month. So they were extrapolating all 12 months and making it a $12,000 purchase per purchase. And it was 2 12-hour selling periods, which doesn't sound like very different. But when you're dealing with the way you do marketing and email marketing, 2 kind of separate periods is different than one 24-hour period. But yeah, so I had a choice at some point to either stay in my very formal job or continue working with this guy. And I took a leap of faith and started working with him, and then did another big launch. And then I ended up partnering with someone else. But I think over 7 or 8 years, I did 7 7-figure product launches. I worked on Brendan Broussard's original Experts Academy launch.
Wow.
But yeah, so that was my product launch email marketing period. And towards the end of that, I started working with somebody on a project, and we had one of the aspects was the Facebook side, and somebody was doing it for us. We just didn't like the way he was doing it. So we ended up firing him, and I started doing it. The guy I was working with got us an international managed partner rep that we met with every week. And for about a year, she was like probably to date one of the best reps I've ever worked with. Like really knew her stuff, really taught me a lot of like foundational information. I actually interacted with that person so much that they invited me to the first ever international agency conference that was in Dublin, Ireland, that I went to. And I actually learned stuff during that conference that today I still leverage as far as understanding what's happening. Everything that I do is based on testing, seeing what works and doesn't work, and then trying to back end the logic as to why maybe that worked better or didn't work. I'm very rarely ever like understanding the logic and doing it a certain way. It's more like I test a bunch of crap, see what works, and then figure out in my mind's eye, why do I think it worked better that way? And then try to leverage that kind of logic in the future. But that's what all my understanding, my strategies, everything is based on that kind of approach to this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing it for over 5 years now. I've probably worked in more niches than you can count. I've worked on more types of funnels than you can think of. Everything from, the typical stuff, opt in for value, like an ebook or some kind of download, a registration, direct for purchase, trying to get them to buy right away, even to stuff like arbitrage, where like the link click cost was what mattered. So my goal was the cheapest link click cost. And then I've done stuff for branding. So the goal for that is more awareness, right? So there's all these different types of things, that different types of kind of funnels or types of traffic that you might need to send. And based on each type of situation, it could very easily change how you approach it, which is what I think not enough people really understand. They kind of think one way of doing it is the way it should be done, that one size fits all. And that's couldn't be the farthest thing from the truth when it comes to Facebook. I think you talk about that kind of thing too, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, we have a methodology of testing and how we run ads. And I mean, it's the opposite of what Facebook will tell you. Facebook's going to tell you to run a dynamic creative ad and set budgets that are going to get 50 conversions in a single ad set. And actually, they want you to run it as a CBO campaign. And then every time someone does it, it just goes to straight crap. So
it's I'm sure for certain situations, it works great. It's just for a lot of situations, it's not going to work great.
I would almost say for most situations, it's not great. In the minor few. Yeah. You know what? So here's what I think is really cool. And I do want to just give some context to everybody here regarding like our relationship with Dave and why we're kind of talking. We've actually, the reason I met Dave, and we're going to get into some things that he has done. And you sent over some screenshot dashboards over the last couple months where I'll just highlight a couple really cool things in that. But what I will say is the reason how we met Dave is because we have a way of doing rapid testing, and we have a methodology called the Ad Lab method, where we teach e-commerce businesses how to test tons of iterations of and find all of these what we call super ads that we can then take these ads, these high performance creatives and media, these high performance headlines and these high performance primary text, and we could take these and we could start testing these against tons of different audiences. So our goal is to find what we call super ads and start testing them against audiences. And so how Dave and I met was the owner of an e-commerce brand that we both work with now. Went through our methodology, went through our boot camp, and was like, oh my goodness, Dave is like our top paid media buyer. This dude spends he spends more than anyone in our whole, they have like 2 different paid media buyers in the company. Like that's how much they spend, right? When you have to have multiple paid media buyers and one can only spend like $2K to $3K a day, and they keep capping there. And then they're like, all right, we got to go bring in Dave. Like, that they're like, Dave is the man, right? So they bring in Dave. So there's 2 of these. and then they brought us in to say, hey, Josh, can you guys and your team run hundreds and hundreds of tests and find the ads to give Dave these ad variations that he could run with and really, really scale. So that's kind of how Dave and I got to meet. And what's cool is we're really scientific on the finding the ad side of it. But Dave, you're kind of the opposite. You're more like less on the creative and the ad copywriting and more on the back end.
That's the piece I've been missing on this project. I get creatives every once in a while, but it's very hit or miss. It's very sporadic. It's not consistent. There's no testing behind it, whatsoever. So for me, I'm very good at working with, doing the best with whatever I'm given. So I can still get good results with that type of creative, but it makes it much harder to scale when you're getting fresh creatives very rarely, especially when the ones you're getting may or may not work. So I'm a traffic centric type ad manager. Most agencies tend to be more creative centric. They focus more on the creative side. Once they find the audiences at work, the way that they refresh their traffic is they just put new creatives up and just keep putting new creatives up. For me, once I find creatives at work, I try to leverage those creatives as much as possible on as much traffic as I possibly can. Different types of audiences. If I had the more creatives I had that work, typically the deeper into audiences I can go into, I can spend more on. For me, and I'm sure we'll get into this more, but I test and I use a lot of kind of smaller increments on everything that I do. So I'm constantly needing to kind of build new stuff up as I'm pausing certain things. Then I'm replacing them with new campaigns. But it's all traffic based. Once I find creatives at work, I can really spend a lot more than most people can on those same creatives and maintain, as good, if not better results, especially at, lower levels of spend. But the higher spend it gets, as I'm sure the harder it gets to maintain results. Mm-hmm. Part of what I've learned over the years is using my approach does allow you to kind of spend more without seeing the same kind of diminishing returns that typically a lot of people that are, running traffic do see. That's one of the big pains that people have is as they spend more, their results go down and they can't figure out how to maintain the same results they got at 2 or 300, at 2 or 3,000. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've been focused on over the years is how can I do that? Because I own the agency I work for, I'm getting all the fee that comes in. So I'm highly motivated to keep the clients, to grow the clients. Whereas, a lot of traffic managers that are working for agencies might not quite be as motivated, have quite I guess motivation is the best word. But yeah, so that's part of the reason that I've kind of gone so deep into this is because I've tried to make sure I can get the best results possible. And the more I spend, typically the more I make, which is a nice win-win for both situations. The client wants you to spend more because you're doing well enough, mm-hmm. then you get compensated more, and then if you're doing well enough, then they want you to spend more and compensated more and everybody wins and everyone's happy. Yeah. So that's, for me, it's all about the traffic side. I'm a left-brained analytic. Anyone that tells you they're both left and right-brained, there are some very rare people that are actually both, mm-hmm. but anyone that typically says that they're good at both sides is either, good at one and not as good at the other, or they're not good at either, especially good. Mm-hmm. I've learned a long time ago that I am left-brained, so I try to focus on the analytical kind of side of all this stuff. I leave the creative side to creative people because I'm not creative. I've tried to, I can successfully approximate creativity by swiping copy off a landing page, and you can get good results that way. Mm-hmm. However, if you actually get a creative person to start doing some creative stuff, typically I can get better results than if I use, my own kind of attempts at creativity. So over the years, I've seen that happen enough that I've learned, let creative people deal with that side and then feed that to me. And then I'll take what they give me and do better with it than almost anyone, out there.
I want to give everybody just a glimpse real quick regarding Dave's analytic left brain. We had a 2-hour meeting last Friday, and we were in the ad account, and I'm in the ad account because we have access as well. And I think I spent 42 minutes him just describing his naming conventions because they're so precise for the 1,031 campaigns that were launched in the last 30 days inside the account that had spend. So very analytical. And I will say, after 2 pages of notes, by just talking to Dave, we've improved a lot of things that we've done. And so I would just say for anybody listening, because we're going to get into the weeds here, and that's what I told Dave that I honestly want to do, because you don't always have the opportunity to talk with someone that is so granular with their thought process and so analytical. So we're going to get into the weeds for sure. But what I will say is whenever someone is talking that spends way more than me, or that has way more experience than I do, or has done something that I desire to do, I have to put my antennas up and I have to open my ears. So if you're listening to this right now and you're like, hey, I'm stuck at I'm just getting started with ads, or I'm spending less than $400,000 a month, then listen, all right? But if you're spending $2 million a month, you'll probably get some good, you might think Dave's strategy is insane at that level of spend. But what I will say is for the most of us, which is probably most people listening, really pay attention, because Dave's strategy is very unique. In fact, I met with Dave on August 25th, which was about 6 weeks ago from when we're recording this. And we implemented something for a live event we did, saw great results. And then we did more tests in the last 2 weeks. And I want to share those at the end of this, because some of the ROASs we are seeing in some of our preliminary initial tests, and we're not nearly as good as Dave, implementing with some of our clients, are really, really good. But one thing I do want to say is we both have access to, I have access to the same ad accounts that Dave does. And I want to just give you guys, I'm going to give Dave a platform right here. So this is not blowing smoke. This is facts. All right. This is real data. In July, he spent $181,000 and produced 440 for a 2.42 ROAS on one account. In August, he spent 144, a little light, man, a light month. What are you doing there, Dave? 144, come on. And he made 300.
Inventory issues, not my fault.
Okay, the inventory, he's blaming the inventory issues. All right. 321K produced at a 2.23. And in the last 2 weeks, I just ran report. We looked at the report. Last 2 weeks spent only $418,836 and produced 1.61 million. So it sounds like inventory was resolved.
Yeah, for the promotion, that's I love that's once a year this business has a sale, and because they only do it once a year, the conversions are just insane. The difference between me spending $5,000 a day and on the regular days, the middle of promotion spending 20, 25. On the peak days, I spent 30 and I spent 50. Would have spent more than 50,000, but the account capped out. For next time, we're getting the cap increased to 100,000. So I think I could have spent at least 70 or 80,000. I think when it was all said and done. But yeah, so it's like my Christmas once a year is this business's once a year sale. But yeah, because the site side conversions changed to such a degree during differing from evergreen, I can go from spending 5,000 and I spent 30 and 50. Next time, I think I'll probably be able to do closer to 50 to 75 to 80 during those first couple of days. Because it's only once a year, I'm still learning how to best leverage this business's sales. Mm-hmm. But that's the stage I'm at now. This is the 4th year that I'm doing the sale. So each year I've kind of leaped in understanding of what's possible. And this year I went, I understood what was going to happen so well that I was able to go from 5 to 30,000 with confidence. Because if I spent 30,000 and got below my business owner's target, I'd be fired the next day. Met the business owner. He doesn't tolerate crap like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But because I've done this for a number of years now, and I've seen what's happened in the past. And like last year, I spent $100,000 in 4 days. So that was for me, that was one of the biggest I'd spent in such a short time period. And then this year, again, I leveraged and the strategy we're going to talk about that I use most of the time is I used during the first couple of days, about 30%, 20% of the traffic was that. And then towards the middle end of the promotion, it was about half my normal approach and then half an approach that I've learned can work, which is, and this sounds crazy, but increasing the budget throughout the day, going from 100 to 500 to 1,000 to 1,500 as more and more sales came in. But monitoring them, because not all of them are going to keep pace. So if you start the day with 100 campaigns, you might only finish with 10 or 15. But if those 10 or 15 can scale to 1,000 or 1,500, all of a sudden that's $10,000, $15,000 to spend. However, in order to maintain kind of and help my ROI stay above my target that my business owner sets, I was also doing about, again, in the beginning when I spent 30 and 50,000, it was about 15 or 20% of the traffic. And then towards the middle end, about half the traffic was using my normal approach and half the traffic was using the scaling, in-day scaling type approach. But yeah, so that's something I can do because I've done it before. I've seen what's happened before with this business. I've kind of been able to each time kind of grow it. And with that understanding, it allowed me to spend $400,000 in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's impressive, man. It's amazing. What I would love to do is, I'm sure anyone listening is also thinking the same thing. What the heck is this strategy that Dave follows? So do I have to spend $50,000 or $5,000 a day to do this? Is, I'm sure, what a lot of people listening might be thinking. Could you break down, let's just kind of start at the top and just, I know there are going to be
I have a couple what I call charity clients, which are the $200 to $300 a day type clients. So I also spent, ironically, at the same time I'm spending $3 to $5 to 10 plus thousand a day, I'm also doing $200 or $300 a day for a couple clients, people that I've worked with for a while, and I like them, so I'm happy to kind of help them. But it also helps me kind of understand the difference between being able to do it at big budget and small budget, and what's necessary kind of at small budgets to try to grow them versus when you have bigger budgets, you have a lot more things you can test and try and see if it works. And even if it doesn't work, you have enough other budget that kind of compensates for what might not work, on a test. So there's a lot of things that you can do at bigger budgets that you can't do at smaller budgets. Having said that, I do understand both sides because I do work on both. And the approach we're about to talk about can be used anywhere from $100 to $200 a day up to about 15 to 18,000 a day. 15 is probably the most. And then you'd probably want to also do some bigger campaigns if you're really trying to get past that $15,000 mark. But when I first spent $15,000 my first time, it was literally on 600 $25 campaigns.
Wow. That's a lot of campaigns, man. I can't imagine how slow Ads Manager was rolling.
I have strategies for building batches that aren't quite 600 individual disparate campaigns, right? So if I have, let's say, 4 different creatives that I know can work, right? And for each audience, I might put up each of those creatives at 25. So every audience is $100 quickly because I have, I can literally put 4 up, 4 different creatives to an audience, duplicate those, change the audience, duplicate those, change the audience, duplicate those, change the audience. And each time I'm doing that, it's a $100 batch, but it's based on 4 $25 campaigns. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily having to build each individual campaign and think through each one. There's ways of kind of grouping things and multiplying things so that 600 is really based on maybe, 50 to 100, 10 to 20 campaign groups that are nice and kind of built easily.
Could you break?
To me, it sounds simple. I've been doing it for a while.
And what I would say is, I've kind of seen some of the strategy, so I know a little bit more. But could you break down, because I'm hearing ads, campaigns, different audiences. Can you break down campaign structure? How are you breaking these down, and what kind of budgets are you working with within these campaigns?
So I've come to believe that the simpler that you set things up, the easier it is for Facebook to kind of optimize. So pretty much everything I do within the context of spending 115,000 a day. So let's take the bigger spend concept out of the discussion right now. For most situations, um, I'm doing one campaign, one ad set, one ad. Now there's certain times where if I have a bunch of creatives, I might create 2 ads per ad set, or 3 ads per ad set, or 4 ads per ad set, and let Facebook kind of decide. The problem with that is that Facebook's throttling the traffic based on some information that's not necessarily information you care about, right? So they might base it on CPM, where the quality, you might want a higher costing CPM traffic because the quality is better, and that'll net you a lower CPA, lower cost per purchase. But Facebook's going to make the decisions very quickly and start throttling traffic, and it's not going to do a very scientific, let me give each one equal amounts of traffic for the first $20, and then after that, let me start throttling. It's making some decisions quicker than I'd like, and on some data that I don't like it doing it on. But when I have no other way of doing it, I'll sometimes do that.
Okay.
Most of the time, it's one campaign, one ad set, one ad. So very simple. Right now, that's another reason I have so many campaigns, is because I'm not putting a bunch of ad sets per campaign. It's just one, and one. I learned during a Facebook conference call, like one of their webinars, that part of the auction decision-making process is campaign history, right? So the history of the campaign, the history of the ad set is part of the decision-making process. In my mind's eye, the problem is that if campaign history is one of the deciding factors, and you have 10 ad sets in that campaign, ad sets that are not performing as well could drive that kind of campaign history quality down a little bit, versus when you have an ad set that's working really well, because that's the only ad set, that campaign history is also really good. So that's part of, the depth that I think about when it comes to, setting this stuff up. But that's part of the reason I think it might work better, is because it's such a clean kind of situation that Facebook only has to focus on one kind of thing for that campaign, and then it can do its best it can, because it's only focusing on one thing. So one campaign, one ad set, one ad, and everything I do is $25. $25, everything. It was funny. One of the ways I first came to start using the strategy was a colleague of mine had mentioned something about one of the bigger spenders he knows on Facebook. He'd rather do 10 of the same thing at smaller budgets than one thing at a bigger budget. Mm-hmm. So I had that in the back of my mind, and I was doing t-shirts for Teespring, and I was losing like 10, 20% a day, something like that. Like every day I was losing money. And then for whatever reason, what that guy had said to me just kind of came back, and I decided to change all my budgets from $100 to $25. That's all I did. Change them. I just cut them into a quarter. And then the very next day, I was like 50 or 60% profitable. And I was like, what the?
I was going to say, why do you think that is?
So part of why I think it is if you ask Facebook to spend about $1 an hour, it takes its sweet time to look for the best people it can for you. If you ask it to spend $4 an hour, $5 or $6, you're forcing it to go much wider into the audience and go to less qualified people. So for some reason, asking it to go to look for the best people 4 times seems to be better than asking it to go broad once. It's weird. There's a lot of times where, so this isn't fact, this is my interpretation, but it's almost like if I put up 10 $25 campaigns or 10 $100 campaigns, I'm going to get the same amount. Like each campaign, if it's spending 25 or 100, it still has the same likelihood of getting 0 to 3 sales a day, right? Because part part of what I see, and I'm sure you're starting to see this when you look in the account, is I have $25 campaigns with crazy high ROIs, every day, because it's only spending 25 and your average order value is $70 or $80 or $60. Then one sale minimum, it's hitting 2+X per day. Now it might not hit a sale every day, but there's days that it might hit 2 or 3 sales, and you'll see a 15, 20X ROI on that campaign. So you'll see these campaigns with these crazy high ROIs, but the key is you can't just create those and only have those. The same one that has 2 sales today might have 0 sales the next 2 days and then have 1 sale. And I'm looking for the average over time, and per kind of client, how many days I'll let a $25 campaign go without getting its first sale might vary. Okay. Some situations might be 2 days. Some situations might be 4 days. But part of that's getting a feel for that, for each situation. Kind of, at what point does the kind of likelihood of a campaign working out drop too low to make it worth now spending more money on it, right? So for the first 2 or 3 days, if it gets a sale, that one might get another sale in another couple of days, and it might be able to literally stay within your target range of results for months. I have campaigns that have been running for 4, 5, 6 months at $25 and continue to perform and continue to get 1, 2, 3 sales every 1, 2, 3 days. But yeah, so so I've seen that enough where it seems like $25 has almost the same likelihood of getting the same 0 to 3 sales per day as $100. That over time, it's almost like each campaign is like a little mini lottery that you might win or not. And if you have for the same $500, you could either have 5 lottery tickets at 100, or you could have 20 lottery tickets at 25. And literally per lottery, like maybe the $100 ones have a little higher chance of winning, but not enough to make up for 5 times the amount of lottery tickets that you have. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I've seen is it's like almost like there's this weird balance that to me 25 seems to be the right spot, where once you get past that, you're now going to go to just more and more people that will never buy that day. You know what I mean? Like it's like each campaign is only going to go to so many people that are buy. Doesn't matter if it spends 25 or 100. Now you start spending 2, 3, 4, 500, and different topic and different discussion. But what I learned in the beginning was spending 25 seemed to net me the same results as spending more, let's say 50 or 100, even, no matter, despite the fact that I was spending more. So with the t-shirt thing, I saw myself go to profit right away, and I was like, wow, this is weird. And then that just grew and grew, and I tested, for instance, 20 $25 campaigns against 5 $100 campaigns against 1 $500 campaign, all the same stuff, right? So it's either 20 duplicates of the same creative audience against 5, copies at 100 and one copy at 500. Every single time I've tried that, the 25s always has the best average, the 500s always has the second best average, and the 500 always has the third best average. Even though it's all the same stuff. It's all the same exact thing. Wow. You start doing that kind of testing and you see those kind of results, and you're like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
maybe I should do things in smaller increments.
Yeah. Well, and it makes a lot of sense. When you give it less, it goes to find, more quality people for those, and Facebook does work harder. So that concept makes sense to me.
It's called pacing. The official term is pacing.
Okay.
Right. So Facebook paces your spend to try to balance how much you're spending with finding the best possible people it can based on how much you're spending. And that pacing, it starts the more you force it to spend, the wider, the less qualified you're forcing it to go to in that same audience, as far as who it thinks are the very best people. Mm-hmm. And that idea seems to, outweigh the idea that when Facebook learns by getting 50 conversions in a campaign, and all of a sudden machine learning kicks in, right? The idea of it finding the very best people seems to outweigh the idea of machine learning. The trick is that it doesn't, like at $25, what you've probably seen is when it works. You have to realize for the ones that work, you're also going to get ones that don't. And the trick is to identify that they're not working quick enough that you pause them. So if you put up 20 campaigns, $20, $25 campaigns, and let's say 7 of them or 8 of them end up getting sales within the first couple of days, and then of those 7 or 8, 5 or 6 of them continue to get results. The first couple of days, the total ad spend for the 20 campaign batch might be a loss. But you start getting into more and more days of those winners making you profit, and they're going to very quickly more than make up for the loss that you had for the entire initial 20 campaign batch. And once you hit profit for that batch that you put up, now it just continues to be profit until they, their life cycle kind of dies off and you get to pause them again. But that's part of the nuance with the strategy, is you really have to stay on top of the campaigns that are and aren't working, to identify them quickly, pause the ones that aren't working, replace them with new $25 tests. And that's part of the ongoing process, is new batches, right? Of those batches, some of them will work. And it's almost like if you put up a new batch, and let's say that batch is based on a new creative, right? You have 10 audiences have worked in the past, and you have a new creative you want to test. So you put this one creative up with 10 new audiences at $25. And now the question is, of those 10, how many of them get results quickly and then continue to produce? If 1 or 2 get results, continue to produce, there's a likelihood that that creative is not that good. I mean, it's good enough to get you 1 or 2, kind of campaigns that worked, but not enough to kind of be happy about. You start getting 3, 4, 5 of those campaigns to become winners, what I call workhorses, right? Then all of a sudden, they quickly make up for the 4 or 5 that didn't work out. Now they're in profit. And now those become part of your foundation of your overall campaigns that you have. So it's kind of like this idea where you're building this foundation and just building upon it, where you find your first group of campaigns that are working, and you put up another test batch, of those 10 that you put up, 3, 4, 5 maybe work. Now you've added those 3 or 4 or 5 to the workhorses, then you replace the ones that didn't work. So you're constantly kind of looking for more and more workhorses. And the magic of this is that if any 1 or 2 or whatever workhorses start dying, because you have it broken up into all these different pieces, your overall results don't die right away. Versus if you have 2, 3, 4, 5 big campaigns, and one of those suckers, dies, now you're scrambling to try to find another campaign that's going to work as well at the budget, that kind of budget.
Yeah.
But it makes for a much less kind of stable situation, versus the way I set it up, I believe, is a much more stable situation. And then when you get to the bigger budgets, sometimes you notice that there's kind of waves of it being easier and harder to get results. I call it kind of smooth water versus rough water, right? And those, what can cause a rough water situation could be all kinds of variables that are going on in the internet, all kinds of things that could be making that happen. So for people that when they start seeing their results die off, because it starts getting a little harder time period, if they just lower their budgets, that doesn't always get the results kind of to kick back where they need to be, because just changing the budget doesn't necessarily, it can mess with the campaign. The way I do it, if I'm lowering the budget, and let's say I have 200 campaigns running at 5,000, I'm like, oh, results aren't where they need to be. I'm going to drop spend to get results better. What I'm doing is I'm cutting the either like tests that haven't performed yet, or workhorses that are starting to die off. But by cutting the worst 20, 30, 40 campaigns out of the group, what I'm left with is a group of campaigns that on average have been working better recently. And that almost always gets my overall results to like kick back up, to where they need to be. because I'm literally just increasing the ratio of performing campaigns within the overall group that I'm working with. And because of that, versus changing the budget and hoping, I'm not hoping for anything. I'm just changing the ratio. I know that these 140 workhorses have worked well in the last 3 to 5 days, right? So if I have those 140 up, but I have 40 to 80 new tests that aren't working, and my overall result doesn't look like it needs to be, if I cut off those 40 that aren't working as well, and I'm left with just the ones that have been working better, it just, unless statistics kind of, overnight, just drop on you, likelihood, I've no less than 15 or 20 times in the last 1 or 2 years, I've gotten results that were below 2x to pop right above 2x overnight just by cutting the worst 20 or 30 campaigns out of the group. Because what I'm left with is just a higher percentage of working campaigns. Crazy, right?
It's interesting. I almost think of it like you're diversifying your investing, and it's not all in these, like everyone says, don't put all your eggs in one basket or 2 baskets. I think of like, it's kind of like mutual funds, right? A mutual fund is essentially a fund with a ton of different stocks versus individual stocks. So if you just had one stock and that stock tanks, or 3 or 4, if you had 4 stocks and 2 of them tank 50%, it hurts your whole portfolio by 25% or whatever. But if you have 200 stocks, I'm a financial nerd, then you're diversified and you kill the top 20, 30% or whatever. And the other ones that are the outliers and really the workhorses, as you say, those carry the train, even if the other ones kind of were pulling it down. Makes a lot of sense. Now, from a budget standpoint, so if something's working, and you've had some of these, it sounds like you mentioned run for like 4, 5, 6 months. Like that's crazy, because I think most people are like, well, Facebook ads fatigue within X amount of weeks or a month or 2 months max. And you have things that have been running for way longer than that.
That's another beauty part of my approach, is that because you're only ever spending $25 per situation, you're never burning out anything quickly. You spend 500 or 1,000 on one thing, you can very quickly burn that out.
Yeah.
But at 25, it can last again for weeks to months because you're spending so little on it. Now, it doesn't mean I won't spend more on the same audience creative combination. I just won't increase the budget on a single campaign. So I might duplicate a campaign and put a second version of it, another $25 version of it up, because the first one was doing so well. It's almost like begging you to spend more, right? Like the ROI is so good on something. It's like, it's almost like you almost, like, especially if you're used to changing budgets, it's almost like you can't even resist changing the budget. Like, it's doing so well, why wouldn't I spend more money on it? Mm-hmm. And the answer is because by spending more money on it, you can very quickly ruin what was doing so well. Mm. You know what I mean? That's what part of what I saw when I was just changing budgets was things would work really well, and then I'd increase the budget and it stopped working so well. I'm like, fuck. I learned over time is why mess with that thing that's working well? Let it just keep working well for as long as it's going to work. Let's just find more things that are working well versus messing with that one. Now, keep in mind, part of my ad set setup is I typically only use one interest when I'm doing interest-based targeting. I only do one interest per ad set, because if that works, well, then I'll look for similar interest and I'll do another, I'll look for what Facebook suggests, and I'll create 2 or 3 or 4 things based on what it suggests, just 2 or 3 for more $25 campaigns, versus combining them and letting Facebook kind of figure out within those which is better. I'm kind of taking that control back by saying I'll figure out which of these interests are doing better on my own. Mm-hmm. And I'll kind of divvy up the spend to figure out where I should spend more, versus kind of letting Facebook do it. Part of the way I've described my approach in the past is I drive the car in manual. Facebook teaches driving the car in automatic. Yes. For most people, automatic is the easier way of driving. You can still drive well. Now, let's take out the modern cars, because modern cars have kind of up the idea that stick shift is get you better performance and let you corner better. Some of the new modern cars kind of take that out of the game. But especially in the old days, a manual, you wouldn't catch anyone, you wouldn't ever catch a Ferrari in automatic. That'd be people would say that's a crying shame. It's a waste of a Ferrari to have it in automatic, because it gives you more control over the car. That's the way I look at my approach. Is I'm taking more control of the situation. It's more work. To anyone listening, my approach is more work. You know what I mean? Like all these different smaller budgets, having to monitor them on a regular basis and kind of see what is and isn't working and replacing things. That's a lot more work. But seems like doing that can squeeze 20, 30, 40% better result out of a situation than doing it the more traditional, bigger budget, kind of letting Facebook, take its, warm up and hopefully start working. And like, oh, it didn't warm up. It didn't start working. I just wasted a bunch of money on that one thing. Never wasting a bunch of money on any one thing with my approach.
So the biggest bottleneck with this approach then is primarily time-based, right? Because the more you have, the more to manage. It becomes what's stopping from going from 200 campaigns at $25? That's $5,000 a day in spend. Why not go 500 campaigns?
Well, because a lot of situations seem to have a natural ceiling of spend before you start seeing diminishing returns without something else changing, right? So with this brand that we're talking about, that we're working on together, with the occasional new creatives, with having a bunch of creatives from the past that I can try to reuse, ones I know have worked, I've been able to hit around $5,000 a day in spend. And every time I try to add more campaigns, my overall, and you have to imagine this business has a minimum of 2x ROI requirement, right? It used to be 2.5, 2.6 until iOS 14 came out. And then he kind of adjusted it down to allow for the fact that Facebook doesn't see as much as it used to. And that's the only way this business tracks results is through Facebook tracking. So we have to kind of extrapolate what we're seeing to what possibly is reality. But where's it going with that?
5K spend, getting stuck there. You only have so much to work with.
So in that situation, with those variables, every time I try to get past 200 campaigns, it's like my ROI average will start hitting 1.9, 1.8, 1.7, and I have to cut it back to 200 to get that to start rising to 2x and above. Now that same business, when they have a once a year sale, I can spend 30 to 50,000 a day. You know what I mean? So when the variable of the site side conversion changes to a noticeable degree, that can change how much I'm able to kind of maximize the situation. Now, the other agency that works in this business is typically spending 20 to 40+% less than me. It's not from lack of trying. It's because using his approach when he starts, and I've seen it, it's funny. I maintain a tracking sheet of both businesses, of both agencies. That's part of the value add that I kind of add to the situation, is that tracking. And every time the other agency starts creeping up their spend to where I am, the results tank so bad that they have to redrop it down. It's happened no less than 20 times in the last 4 years, where they'll start increasing their spend, the results will start dropping, and they'll have to re-go down to get back over 2x while I'm still up here. And after 3-4 years of seeing this, it just helps kind of support the case that the way I do stuff does allow for kind of a higher max spend while hitting whatever ROI that you're targeting. Now, if this business was targeting a 1.3 or 1.4 ROI, I could spend 10, 15,000 during Evergreen, no problem. It's the 2x plus requirement that makes it kind of, once I hit $5,000, it starts getting real tricky to start pushing past that. Now, if the creative side conversions, if I started getting a steadier stream of creatives that I know can get the job done, that very well could easily let me get past 5,000. The problem is that I've been using, the same 5 or 10 creatives, 15 creatives, and then every once in a while I'll get a new one to kind of add into the mix. So it kind of makes it harder to kind of go deeper into audiences. It makes it harder to it just makes it harder when you have less creatives to work with. That's the reason I'm excited to work with you, because if I can start getting a steady stream of solid creatives, I think there's a good chance I could break past the 5,000 kind of ceiling that I've been at. But that's the answer to your question. Like, a lot of situations do seem, and it's not the first time I've seen it, where there seems to be this natural cap that you hit, kind of this, you are kind of maximizing results within your target range of results, whatever that might be. And in order to get past that, something fundamentally is going to have to change. It's not going to just be one amazing creative, right? I am so against spending a ton of money to try to create this be all end all creative that will all of a sudden change your result. Like magic, all of a sudden you'll be able to spend 5 times what you're spending and make 20 times like, and if there is an example of that where it's happened, I promise you it's the exception. You know what I mean? It's like someone that, if you're a poker player, someone that chases a gut shot straight, happens to hit it, and they chase it every time because they think they can hit it. It's like, just because you got lucky once doesn't mean you should keep doing something. That's going to lose you more money over time doing that. So to me, it's about, continuously finding more and more solid creatives that can get you results within the target range that you're looking for. And that doesn't mean it's always easy to find those, but very rarely with time and budget. So I worked on a project where I was spending around $2,000 a day. And for a year, I didn't get any creative help whatsoever. I was using the same friggin' 3 or 4 creatives for the entire year. And what's interesting is, on any given month, it might look like one of those creatives was more than a little better than the other 3 creatives, or 2 might look a lot better than the other 2. But the next month, they would toggle. And the ones that looked the worst the previous month are now the best 2. And then it would mix up again. And then when I looked at it over the entire year, I shit you not, their average result was within like 2 percentage points of each other. Right? So each month it looked like 1 or 2 or 3 were like they were better than the other. And then they keep toggling, and at the end of the year, they were literally the exact same with time and budget. And that's when I started understanding that you have to be very careful of thinking that a creative might be better than another one unless you've tested a lot. In reality, if you start seeing creative getting you results within your target range often enough, you can kind of put that into the library of can get the job done. Now, when you're testing a new audience, you have a library of 4, 6, 8 creatives that can get the job done. You go into that library, you pull those 4 out, you put up, 2, 3, 4 $25 campaigns with 2, 3, 4 creatives with that new audience. And then if you put up 4 and 2 of those get results, then that audience is probably one that you can reuse again in the future. If if only 1 or none of them get results, well, you don't probably want to use that audience again in the future. And then you start building up your library of audiences that can get the job done. And then you start, and as you build up each library of audiences and creatives, you're able to spend more and more by mixing and matching your creatives that can get the job done with your audiences that can get the job done. Crazy, wow. Huh? It seems so simple. It just starts building up. And then lookalikes. You want to hear my strategy on lookalikes? No one uses this strategy. A foreshadow.
Hey guys, Dylan Counts here, producer of the Ecommerce Alley podcast. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. This episode was so jam-packed with so much, we actually had to cut it into 2 parts. So make sure you come back next week for part 2.